A decorated FBI agent returning home from an undercover operation finds himself face down on asphalt, handcuffed by a small-town officer who refuses to believe the luxury sedan belongs to him. When the truth emerges, it shatters more than one man's career. It exposes a system built on assumptions and forces a reckoning no badge can escape. The fluorescent lights of the gas station buzzed like trapped insects. Marcus Webb stood beside his midnight blue BMW, one hand resting on the roof, the other reaching for the fuel nozzle. The asphalt radiated heat even as the sun dipped below the Virginia hills. A patrol car sat idling near the convenience store entrance. Its engine rumbled low and steady. Marcus twisted the gas cap closed. The metal clicked softly. He felt eyes on him before he saw them, a crawling sensation between his shoulder blades that came from years of training and a lifetime of experience. "Excuse me, sir." The voice cut through the humid evening air. Marcus turned slowly. Officer Dawson approached with measured steps, one hand hovering near his holster, mid-40s, ruddy complexion, jaw set like concrete. His nameplate caught the light. "Evening, officer." Marcus kept his voice level, his hands visible. "That your vehicle?" Dawson gestured toward the BMW with his chin. "Yes, sir. Just finished fueling up." Dawson's eyes traveled from the car's polished hood to Marcus's charcoal suit, wrinkled from 18 hours of driving. Something hardened in the officer's expression. "License and registration. Now." Marcus moved with deliberate slowness, telegraphing every motion. He reached into his jacket's inner pocket. His fingers brushed against leather. His wallet, his credentials. His entire identity compressed into a few cards and a badge. "Here's my license." Marcus extended it with steady fingers. Dawson snatched it without looking at Marcus's face. He walked back to his patrol car, speaking into his radio. The static crackled across the parking lot. 2 minutes passed. Then 3. Marcus stood perfectly still, aware of the gas station attendant watching through the window. A teenager with a phone raised, filming. A mother ushering her children into a minivan, glancing back nervously. Dawson returned. His hand now rested on his weapon. "Step away from the vehicle. Keep your hands where I can see them." "Is there a problem, officer?" "This vehicle matches a theft advisory from 2 counties over. I need you to step away, now." Marcus's pulse quickened, but his voice remained calm. "This is my car. I can show you the registration, proof of—" "Step away from the vehicle." Dawson's fingers tightened around his gun grip. The air thickened with tension. Marcus raised both hands to shoulder height and stepped backward. His shoes scraped against the pavement. "Turn around. Hands behind your back. Officer, I'm FBI. My credentials are in my wallet. If you'll just turn around." Marcus complied. The world tilted as Dawson grabbed his wrist and yanked his arm down. Pain shot through his shoulder. Cold metal bit into his wrists. The handcuffs clicked shut with brutal finality. "You're making a mistake," Marcus said quietly. Dawson pushed him toward the patrol car. Marcus stumbled. His wallet slipped from his jacket pocket and hit the asphalt with a soft thud, landing face down beside the BMW's rear tire. The leather gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Inside it, invisible to everyone, a gold badge waited in silence. 6 hours earlier, Marcus had crossed the state line with the windows down and the radio off. He needed silence after 3 weeks of noise. The constant hum of wire surveillance, the rehearsed conversations, the weight of a false identity worn like ill-fitting clothes. The undercover operation had ended at dawn in a Baltimore warehouse. 9 arrests, 3 weapons recovered, a trafficking network dismantled piece by careful piece. Marcus had played his role perfectly, a corrupt freight manager, morally flexible, hungry for cash. He'd become someone else so completely that when the raid team breached the doors, he'd almost forgotten which side he was on. Now, he was just Marcus again, exhausted. 48 hours without real sleep. muscles tight from tension he couldn't release until he crossed his own threshold. The BMW handled the highway curves with familiar ease. He'd bought it used 4 years ago, saved for 2 years before that. His father had raised an eyebrow at the purchase. "You sure you want to drive something that flashy?" Marcus had understood the subtext, the warning wrapped in concern, but he'd bought it anyway. This car represented something his father's generation had been denied, the ability to own something beautiful without apologizing for it, without making yourself smaller to avoid attention. His phone sat in the cup holder, screen dark. 17 missed calls from Simone, 4 voicemails. He would call her from home, hear her voice without the filter of exhaustion distorting every word. He thought about his daughter, Naya. 9 years old, gap-toothed, obsessed with ballet and astronomy in equal measure. He'd missed her recital 2 weeks ago. She'd forgiven him instantly, the way children do before the world teaches them to hold grudges. "It's okay, Daddy. You were catching bad guys, right?" Right. That's what he told himself during the long nights, the dangerous meetings, the moments when his cover story felt more real than his actual life. He was catching bad guys. He was making the system work. He was proof that the shield and the oath meant something beyond the metal and the words. The gas gauge needle touched empty near Fredericksburg. He took the next exit, following signs to a well-lit station off the main highway. The sun hung low and orange, painting the sky in shades of amber and rust. Marcus pulled up to pump 7. He killed the engine and sat for a moment in the sudden quiet. His reflection stared back from the rearview mirror, dark circles under darker eyes, 2-day stubble, the residue of someone else's life still clinging to his features. He climbed out. The evening air felt thick and warm, carrying the smell of gasoline and fast food from the building nearby. He stretched, feeling vertebrae pop and realign. His suit jacket hung loose on his frame. He'd lost weight during the operation. The gas pump clicked and hummed as he filled the tank. He watched the numbers climb, the dollars adding up in green digital figures. $60 to fill a tank. His father had once driven a Buick that cost $30. Inflation, sure, but also proof of distance traveled, generations crossed, barriers broken, or so he'd believed. A patrol car turned into the parking lot. Marcus noticed it peripherally, the way he noticed everything, trained awareness that never fully shut off. The car idled near the entrance. He finished fueling, twisted the cab shut, and heard his name that wasn't quite his name. "Excuse me, sir." The tone made his skin prickle, professional but cold. The voice of authority preparing for confrontation. Marcus turned, and in that turning, his evening, his career, his understanding of the badge he carried, all of it pivoted on a single axis of assumption and accusation. Officer Dawson stood 10 feet away, positioned at an angle that gave him clear line of sight to both Marcus and the BMW. His posture radiated readiness, weight balanced, hand near weapon, eyes scanning for threat indicators. "That your vehicle?" Dawson asked, though his tone suggested the answer didn't matter. Marcus recognized the look in the officer's eyes. He'd seen it before, would see it again, that flicker of suspicion that arrives before questions, before evidence, before innocence can even state its case. "Yes, sir." "Just finished fueling up." Marcus kept his hands visible, his voice measured. The training kicked in automatically. But so did something older. The lessons his father had drilled into him before he could drive, before he could vote, before he understood why these lessons were necessary. Dawson's gaze moved from Marcus's face to his wrinkled suit, to the BMW's polished exterior. The equation forming behind his eyes was transparent. Expensive car plus black man equals probability of wrongdoing, license and registration, now. No please, no explanation, just the command. Marcus reached into his jacket slowly. His fingers found his wallet. FBI credentials pressed against his driver's license, both waiting in leather darkness. He could pull both out, Flash the badge. Watch the officer's expression crumble into apology and panic. But something stopped him. Curiosity, maybe, or the desire to see how far this would go. How quickly authority could become tyranny. He handed over only the license. "Here you go." Dawson took it without comment and returned to his patrol car. Marcus heard the radio crackle, heard Dawson's voice requesting a check on the plates. The numbers read aloud, a vehicle reduced to registration code and suspect status. The gas station parking lot felt suddenly exposed. Marcus noticed the teenager near the air pump, phone raised, recording. A white woman in a minivan gripped her steering wheel tighter, eyes darting between Marcus and the patrol car. The gas station attendant pressed against the window inside, watching the scene unfold like reality television. Marcus had stood in worse situations. He'd negotiated with hostage takers, faced down armed suspects, walked into rooms where everyone wanted him dead. But this standing in a public parking lot, while being treated as criminal by default, this scraped against something deeper than fear. Dawson emerged from his car with different body language. Aggressive now. Hand resting on his holster, he approached like Marcus had transformed in those 3 minutes, from citizen to threat. Step away from the vehicle. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Is there a problem, officer? This vehicle matches a theft advisory from 2 counties over. Step away now. This is my car." Marcus kept his voice level despite the heat building in his chest. "I can show you the registration, proof of purchase, insurance." "I said step away from the vehicle." Dawson's hand tightened on his weapon. The crowd had grown. 5 people now, maybe 6. All filming. All watching a scene they'd seen before in different parking lots, different cities, different victims who all shared Marcus's skin. Marcus raised his hands slowly. He stepped backward. "Officer, I'm FBI. My credentials are in my wallet. If you'll just let me—" "Turn around. Hands behind your back." The words hit like physical blows. Marcus's training screamed at him to identify himself, to flash the badge, to end this before it escalated. But his exhaustion, his anger, his bone-deep weariness at having to prove his innocence before being granted basic dignity, all of it made him hesitate 1 second too long. Dawson moved fast. He grabbed Marcus's wrist and yanked his arm down and back. Pain exploded in Marcus's shoulder. He gasped despite himself. "You're making a mistake," Marcus said through gritted teeth. The handcuffs bit into his wrists, cold metal locking around bone and tendon. Dawson's knee pressed into Marcus's back, pushing him forward. Marcus stumbled. His polished shoes scraped against asphalt. "You have the right to remain silent." Dawson's voice recited the Miranda rights in a monotone, words rendered meaningless by routine and contempt. Marcus stared at the ground, at the oil stains and cigarette butts, at his own shadow stretching long under the fluorescent lights. He felt his wallet slip from his jacket pocket, heard it hit the pavement with a sound too soft to mean anything. But it meant everything. The leather case lay beside his car's rear tire, closed, silent. Inside it, a gold FBI badge caught no light, reflected no authority, spoke no truth. It simply waited, patient as justice, indifferent as the law it claimed to represent. Dawson pushed Marcus toward the patrol car. The teenager with the phone circled for a better angle. The woman in the minivan drove away quickly. Her children's faces pressed against the rear window. And Marcus Webb, 12-year FBI veteran, decorated agent, son of Detroit, father of 1, husband of 12 years, became another statistic in a story older than his badge, deeper than his credentials, more persistent than any truth he could speak. The patrol car door slammed shut. Through the window, Marcus could see his BMW, his car, his proof, his price, all of it meaningless against the weight of assumption. The patrol car's interior smelled of disinfectant and old coffee. Marcus sat with his wrists cuffed behind him, metal digging into bone. His shoulders screamed from the angle. He focused on breathing, slow, controlled, the way he'd been trained. Through the window, he watched Dawson inspect the BMW. The officer circled it like a predator, peering through windows, checking door handles, looking for evidence of a crime that didn't exist. Marcus's jaw clenched. 12 years. 12 years of proving himself in academy classes, where instructors watched him with extra scrutiny. 12 years of being the only black agent in briefing rooms. 12 years of closing cases, earning commendations, doing everything right. And it meant nothing here. Nothing at all. His father's voice echoed in his memory, words spoken 20 years ago in their Detroit kitchen. "Marcus, I'm proud you're joining the Bureau. But listen to me carefully. That badge won't protect you from everyone. Some people, they'll see your skin before they see your shield." Remember that, he'd argued then. Young, idealistic, armed with test scores and acceptance letters. "Dad, things are different now. The system is changing." His father had smiled sadly. "The system changes slow. Slower than we do. Just be careful, son." "Promise me you'll be careful," Marcus had promised. And he'd been careful. Years of careful. Careful with his words in meetings. Careful with his tone during arrests. Careful to exceed every expectation. To give no one ammunition. To be twice as qualified for half the recognition. Careful. And it still wasn't enough. He thought about Simone waiting at home, probably checking her phone, wondering why he hadn't called. He thought about Nia practicing her pirouettes in the living room, counting turns, dreaming of stages and spotlights. What would he tell them? How would he explain this? His wallet lay somewhere on that asphalt. Inside it, his badge, the symbol he'd worn with pride, the proof of his oath, the metal that was supposed to mean something. But right now, through this window, watching Dawson rifle through his glove compartment, Marcus understood what his father had tried to tell him all those years ago. The badge didn't make him equal. It made him different. And different wasn't always enough. A spark of something flickered in his chest. Not quite rage, not quite resignation. Something harder, colder. A decision forming in the space between humiliation and action. They could handcuff him. They could assume. They could treat him like he was guilty until proven innocent, or even after proof arrived, but they couldn't make him silent, not anymore. Marcus was 7 when his Uncle Ray was arrested. He remembered the night in fragments, flashing lights painting the living room walls red and blue, his mother's sharp intake of breath, his father's slow, careful movements as he tried to understand what was happening. Uncle Ray had been walking home from his shift at the auto plant. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong face for the neighborhood he was cutting through. A robbery had occurred 3 blocks away. The suspect description was vague. Black male, 20s, medium build. Ray was 22, tired, wearing his work uniform. He spent 2 years in prison before DNA evidence cleared him. By then he'd lost his job, his apartment, his fiancée. Marcus remembered visiting him after his release. Ray's eyes hollowed out, his laugh gone. Something fundamental broken inside him that never quite healed. His father had pulled Marcus aside that summer. "You see what happened to Ray? That's what I'm protecting you from. That's why I teach you to keep your hands visible. That's why I tell you to say yes, sir, even when you want to scream. Because the system doesn't always care about innocence. Sometimes it just cares about convenience." But Marcus had wanted to change that system. Not run from it, not just survive it, change it. He joined the FBI at 26, fresh from law school, idealistic enough to believe one person could make a difference. The academy had tested him in ways he hadn't expected. Not the physical training, he'd excelled there. Not the academics. His mind was sharp, focused. It was the other tests, the subtle ones. The instructor who'd questioned whether he'd really earned his high marks. The classmate who'd joked about Marcus being a diversity hire. The supervisor who'd warned him that some communities wouldn't trust an agent who looked like him. He'd absorbed it all. Converted the doubt into fuel. Every condescending remark became motivation. Every skeptical glance became a challenge to prove them wrong. And he had proven them wrong. Case after case, year after year. He'd worked organized crime, violent gangs, corruption. He'd testified in federal court 17 times. He'd saved lives, hostages, victims, even other agents. The BMW had been his 40th birthday present to himself. Simone had worried it was too expensive, too flashy. But Marcus had insisted. His father had driven used cars his entire life, afraid that anything nice would draw unwanted attention. Marcus refused to live that way. "We earned this," he'd told Simone, signing the paperwork. "We did everything right. We deserve to enjoy it." She'd kissed his cheek. "Just be careful." Everyone kept telling him to be careful, as if care could stop assumptions, as if caution could prevent other people's prejudice. His father had visited when they brought the car home. He'd run his hand along the hood, admiring the craftsmanship. Then he'd looked at Marcus with those same sad eyes from 20 years ago. "It's beautiful, son. Just remember, I know, Dad, I'll be careful." But careful wasn't enough. Careful never had been. Now Marcus sat in handcuffs, watching a small-town officer treat his achievement like evidence of crime. All those years, all those cases, all those times he'd proven himself, erased by one man's assumption in one parking lot. His father's dream had been simpler, safer. Keep your head down. Do your work, don't draw attention. Survive. Marcus had wanted more than survival. He'd wanted dignity, equality, the right to exist without constantly proving his innocence, and this was the price. This humiliation, this reminder that no matter how high he climbed, how many badges he earned, how perfectly he performed, some people would always see the color before the credentials. Uncle Ray's hollow eyes flashed in his memory. His father's warnings echoed. And Marcus felt something harden inside him. Not defeat, but resolve. This wouldn't break him the way it had broken Ray. He wouldn't let it. At the police station, Marcus was processed like any other suspect. Fingerprints, photographs, personal effects logged into an evidence bag. Dawson moved through the procedure with mechanical efficiency, avoiding eye contact. A younger officer, Torres, handled the paperwork. She was late 20s, professional, her uniform crisp and her movements careful. She kept glancing at Marcus with an expression he couldn't quite read, concern maybe, or recognition that something here didn't fit the usual pattern. Marcus sat in the holding cell. The bench was hard plastic, bolted to the wall. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. He'd seen cells like this during raids, during arrests. Never from this side of the bars. His shoulders still ached from the handcuffs. His suit was creased and dirty from being pushed against the patrol car. But his mind stayed sharp, cataloguing everything. Names, badge numbers, procedures followed or ignored. Through the cell's narrow window, he watched Torres open the evidence bag containing his belongings. She pulled out his phone, his keys, his wallet. She opened the wallet with casual efficiency, probably checking for cash to log. Then she froze. Marcus saw the moment recognition hit her. The way her eyes widened, the way her hand trembled slightly as she lifted the leather flap to reveal what was inside. His FBI credentials. The badge he'd earned 12 years ago. The ID card with his photo, his title, his authority printed in official text. Torres's face drained of color. She looked up through the window directly at Marcus. Their eyes met. He saw the question in her expression, the sudden understanding of what had happened. She turned quickly toward Dawson's desk where the senior officer was filling out reports. Her voice carried across the room, urgent, but trying to stay professional. "Dawson, you need to see this." What? He didn't look up from his paperwork. The suspect. His wallet. Handle it, Torres. I'm busy." She walked to his desk, the wallet held in both hands like volatile evidence. "Sir, you need to look at this now." Something in her tone made Dawson glance up. He snatched the wallet from her hands, his expression annoyed. Then he opened it. Marcus watched Dawson's face transform. Confusion first, then disbelief. Then something uglier, the dawning realization of catastrophic error. This could be fake, Dawson said, but his voice cracked slightly. Torres was already at the computer, fingers flying across the keyboard. I'm checking the federal database. 30 seconds of silence. The only sound was the keyboard clicking and the fluorescent lights humming their mechanical song. Then Torres leaned back from the screen. He's real. Special Agent Marcus Webb, FBI. 12 years of service. Active status. Current assignment. She squinted at the screen. Classified undercover operation, closed this morning. Multiple commendations. Spotless record. The room went still. The other officers in the station, 3 of them, all turned to stare. At the computer screen. At Dawson. At the holding cell where Marcus sat, watching the truth detonate in slow motion. Dawson's hand shook as he set the wallet down on his desk. He stared at the badge, gold and legitimate and utterly damning. Torres spoke carefully, her voice measured. Sir, what was the theft advisory you mentioned? What was the vehicle description? Dawson didn't answer immediately. He pulled up his computer screen, clicked through files. His jaw worked, grinding teeth against truth. There was no active advisory. The admission came out barely above a whisper. I saw similar vehicle type mentioned in a bulletin from last week. Different color. Different plates. Torres closed her eyes briefly. You arrested him based on a bulletin that didn't match. He fit a profile. The car was expensive. He seemed... Dawson stopped, realizing that every word he spoke was digging a deeper hole. Marcus stood slowly in his cell. He walked to the bars, gripped them with both hands. When he spoke, his voice cut through the station's shocked silence like a blade. I seemed what, Officer Dawson? I seemed nervous. I seemed out of place. Or I seemed black. No one answered. The truth hung in the air, undeniable. Torres retrieved the keys with hands that shook slightly. She walked to the cell, unlocked the door. Special Agent Webb, We're so sorry. This was a mistake. A terrible mistake. Marcus stepped out. He took his wallet from Dawson's desk without asking permission. Clipped his badge to his belt where it belonged. When he looked at Dawson, his expression was granite. A mistake is grabbing the wrong file. A mistake is misspelling a name. This, he gestured at the cell, at the evidence bag, at everything. This was a choice. And choices have consequences. Dawson stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. His face had cycled from pale to flushed, panic giving way to defensive anger. Now hold on just a minute. I was doing my job. You matched a description. I matched a description? Marcus's voice stayed level, but ice ran beneath it. What description? Black man in a car. That's not what Dawson stopped, seeming to realize he was speaking on record, in a room full of witnesses. With his career crumbling around him, Torres stepped forward, positioning herself slightly between the 2 men. Special Agent Webb, please. Let us make this right. We can release you immediately, return all your property and what? Marcus turned his cold gaze to her. Forget this happened. Pretend you didn't handcuff a federal agent based on nothing but skin color and assumptions. It was a routine traffic stop, Dawson said, voice rising. You were driving an expensive vehicle. I had reasonable suspicion. Reasonable suspicion of what? Being black near a BMW? Marcus took a step closer. I gave you my license. You ran my plates. Everything came back clean. But you arrested me anyway. Why? The question hung in the air unanswered. Because the answer was too obvious, too damning to speak aloud. Dawson's jaw clenched. I was protecting this community. I was following my training. If you just identified yourself as FBI from the start, I shouldn't have to flash my badge to be treated like a human being. Marcus's voice rose for the first time. I gave you my license. I complied with every order. I stood there while you humiliated me in front of witnesses. And now you want to blame me for not making it easier for you? Torres interjected softly. Special Agent Webb, please understand. Officer Dawson has an exemplary record, 20 years of service. This was an isolated incident, a misunderstanding that escalated. If we could just discuss this calmly, calmly, Marcus laughed, a harsh sound without humor. I've been calm this entire time. I was calm when he threw me against my car. Calm when he cuffed me. Calm while sitting in your cell. How much calmer do I need to be? An older officer emerged from a back office, the sergeant on duty, grey-haired, weathered face, showing careful neutrality. Agent Webb, I'm Sergeant Miller. I've been briefed on the situation. On behalf of this department, I apologize for the mishandling. Marcus shook his head. You're already choosing your words for the report, making it sound like a procedural error instead of what it was. Miller's expression hardened slightly. And what was it, in your opinion? Racial profiling. False arrest. Violation of civil rights. Take your pick. The words landed like grenades. Dawson's face flushed deeper. Miller's jaw tightened. Torres looked at the floor. Those are serious allegations, Miller said carefully. If you intend to file a formal complaint, that's your right. But I'd encourage you to consider what? Making this go away quietly. Letting you sweep it under the rug. Marcus grabbed his keys from the desk. I'm leaving. I'm taking my vehicle. And then I'm going to think very carefully about what happens next. Dawson found his voice again, desperate now. Listen, Agent Webb, this can all be forgotten. No arrest record, no paperwork. We all just move on. You go home to your family. I go back to my patrol. Nobody needs to turn this into something bigger than it is. Marcus paused at the door. He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. Bigger than it is? You arrested me for driving while black. You humiliated me in public. You treated me like a criminal despite every indication I wasn't. And now you want to forget it happened? I'm asking you to be reasonable, Dawson said. We can work this out between us. Professional to professional. For a long moment, Marcus didn't respond. The station held its breath. Then he spoke, voice quiet but carrying weight. I'll think about it. He walked out into the night. Behind him, he heard Dawson exhale in relief. Heard Miller tell everyone to get back to work. Heard the machinery of institutional self-protection grinding into gear. But as Marcus climbed into his BMW, his car, his property, his proof, he knew something they didn't. He wasn't going to forget. And he wasn't going to let them bury this. Marcus drove home in silence. No music, no radio, just the hum of tires on asphalt and the sound of his own breathing. The dashboard clock read 11:47 p.m., 8 hours since he'd left Baltimore. A lifetime since he'd believed the badge meant something everywhere. The house was dark except for the porch light, Simone's signal that she'd waited up. Gave up but left the light on so he'd know he was expected. Forgiven in advance for being late again. He sat in the driveway for 5 minutes, engine off, staring at the steering wheel. His wrist still bore red marks from the handcuffs. His shoulder still ached. But those were just physical echoes. The real damage sat deeper, in the space where certainty used to live. Inside, Simone was curled on the couch, wrapped in her robe, laptop open. She looked up when he entered, relief flooding her face. Then she saw his expression and the relief died. Marcus, what happened? He couldn't find words. He crossed the living room and pulled her into his arms, holding tight, feeling her warmth remind him he was home. Safe. Intact. Baby, you're scaring me. Talk to me, he told her. All of it. The gas station, the arrest, the handcuffs, the cell. The badge discovered too late. The apologies that meant nothing. Simone listened with growing horror. When he finished, she pulled back, eyes bright with angry tears. They arrested you. They actually... She couldn't finish the sentence. It's over now. I'm home. It's done. Done? She grabbed her phone from the coffee table. Marcus, it's not done. Look. She turned the screen toward him. A video was playing. Shaky phone footage from the gas station. Marcus on the ground, hands being cuffed behind his back. Dawson's knee in his back. The crowd watching, filming, doing nothing. The video had been posted 3 hours ago. It already had 50,000 views. The caption read, Black man arrested for driving while black. This is America. Comments flooded beneath it. Some supportive, some skeptical, some openly hostile. The video was being shared, reposted, dissected by strangers who didn't know his name but recognized his story. Nia saw this, Simone whispered. Before I could stop her, she was using my phone to play games, and the notification popped up. Someone we know shared it. She clicked on it and Simone's voice broke. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. Where is she? Asleep. Finally. After an hour of questions I couldn't answer. Simone's hands shook. She asked me why the policeman was hurting her daddy. She asked if you were a bad guy. She asked if she's supposed to be afraid of police now. Marcus closed his eyes. This was the price he hadn't calculated. Not his own humiliation. He could carry that. But his daughter's stolen innocence, her introduction to a truth no 9-year-old should have to learn. His phone buzzed. Then again, then continuously, a flood of notifications. Texts, calls, emails. He glanced at the screen. The first message was from his bureau chief. Marcus, I saw the video. We need to talk. Call me immediately. The second was from a colleague. Brother, are you okay? This is all over social media. The third was from a number he didn't recognize. You got what you deserved. Learn your place. And then more, dozens, hundreds. The phone vibrating itself across the coffee table like something alive. Simone picked it up, scrolled through the messages. Her face hardened. You have to do something. You can't let them get away with this. Simone, if I file a complaint, it becomes a whole thing. Investigation, publicity, media attention. Everything we've built. What about what they took? She grabbed his hands, forced him to meet her eyes. Your dignity. Your sense of safety. Nia's trust in the system you've spent your whole career defending. Marcus had no answer. He thought about staying silent, taking the apologies and the promises, and the unspoken understanding that making waves would damage his career more than Dawson's. His phone buzzed again. This time a longer message from his bureau chief. Marcus, I know this is difficult, but you need to know something before you decide how to proceed. I pulled Dawson's department records. This isn't the first incident. 3 similar complaints in 18 months, all involving people of color. All settled quietly before formal investigation. Internal Affairs has been watching this department. Your case could be the catalyst we need. But it's your choice. Call me when you're ready. Marcus read the message 3 times. Then he looked at his wife, at the worry etched in her face. He thought about Nia sleeping upstairs, dreaming about ballet and stars, not knowing yet how much harder her world had just become. He thought about his father's warnings, his uncle's hollow eyes, the careful life of someone who learned to make himself small. And he thought about the badge in his wallet. Not the metal, but what it was supposed to represent. Justice, accountability, the idea that the system could be fair if enough people fought to make it so. I need to make a call, he said quietly. Simone squeezed his hand. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. Marcus picked up his phone. But before he could dial, another notification appeared. This one an email from an address he didn't recognize. The subject line read, You're not alone. He opened it. Inside was a detailed account from another victim, a Latino teenager who'd been pulled over by Dawson 6 months ago, searched without cause, arrested on fabricated charges that were later dropped. The teen's father had tried to complain, but was told he'd misunderstood the situation, that his son's arrest was justified, that making trouble would only make things worse. The email ended with a single line. If you speak up, we will too, please. Someone has to stop him. Marcus sat in his living room, phone in hand, video of his own arrest playing silently on his wife's laptop. The house was quiet except for the old refrigerator humming in the kitchen and the distant sound of Nia breathing in her sleep. He had a choice. The safe choice, the careful choice, the choice his father might have made, or the other choice. The harder one. The one that meant becoming more than a victim, becoming a catalyst, Marcus looked at Simone. It's bigger than me. There are others, and if I stay silent, I'm telling them their suffering doesn't matter. She nodded slowly. Then you know what you have to do. He dialed his bureau chief. The call connected on the first ring, Marcus. Are you all right? No, sir. I'm not. And I need to know. If I move forward with this, will the bureau back me? Okay, pause, then. We'll do more than back you. We'll investigate. This department has been on our radar. Your case gives us grounds to act. Marcus exhaled slowly. Then let's act. After he hung up, Simone pulled him close. They sat together in the dark, holding each other against the storm they both knew was coming. Upstairs, Nia slept. Tomorrow she would have questions, and Marcus would have to find answers that didn't steal her hope while telling her the truth. But tonight, in this moment, he'd made his choice. The video kept playing on the laptop screen. Marcus face down on the pavement, the crowd watching. The injustice captured in pixels and posted for the world to see, and somewhere in that footage, between the humiliation and the handcuffs, was proof. Not just of what happened to him, but of what happened to people who looked like him every day in parking lots, at traffic stops. In moments when authority met prejudice and innocence wasn't enough, Marcus closed the laptop. The screen went dark, but the fight was just beginning. The next 72 hours felt like drowning in slow motion. Marcus filed his formal complaint with the FBI's Civil Rights Division. The paperwork was clinical, reducing his humiliation to checkbox categories and incident codes. Each question felt like reliving the moment. The pavement against his cheek, the metal biting his wrists, the crowd's silence. The story exploded across local news, then national media. His name, his face, his career, all suddenly public property. Reporters camped outside his house. His phone never stopped ringing. The Bureau placed him on administrative leave pending investigation, which felt less like protection and more like quarantine. Dawson's department issued a statement. We take all allegations seriously and are conducting a thorough internal review. Translation: we're circling the wagons, preparing our defense, waiting for this to blow over. Marcus stopped checking social media after the death threats started arriving. Anonymous accounts promising violence, telling him to know his place, suggesting he'd gotten what he deserved. Some came from profiles with thin blue line flags, others from strangers who saw the video and decided he must have done something to provoke it. Simone fielded calls from concerned friends and curious reporters with equal grace. But Marcus saw the strain in her shoulders, the way she flinched at unexpected knocks on the door. Nia stopped sleeping through the night. She'd appear in their bedroom doorway at 2 a.m., asking if Daddy was safe, if the bad policeman was coming back. Marcus sat in his home office, staring at files he couldn't focus on. The room felt too small, the walls pressing in. He'd built this life carefully, the career, the house, the reputation. All of it now cracked like glass under pressure. His father called every day. You did the right thing, son. I'm proud of you. But Marcus heard the worry beneath the pride, the fear that doing right wouldn't keep him safe. On the fourth day, Marcus drove to the gas station where it happened. He didn't know why. Maybe to prove he could. Maybe to reclaim the space that had been stolen from him. The parking lot looked different in afternoon sunlight. Ordinary. Gas pumps humming. Customers coming and going. Life continuing as if nothing had happened here. But Marcus saw the spot where he'd stood. The pavement where his wallet had fallen. The angle where the teenager had filmed everything. He filled his tank slowly, hyper-aware of every car that passed, every person who glanced his way. A white pickup truck pulled up to the adjacent pump. The driver, older man, weathered face, looked at Marcus, then at the BMW, then back at Marcus. Recognition flickered in his eyes. He'd seen the video. Marcus braced for confrontation, for judgment, for another reminder that he'd never be seen first as a person. But the man just nodded. a small gesture almost invisible, then pumped his gas and drove away. Marcus stood alone in the parking lot. The wind carried the smell of gasoline and fried food. Somewhere Dawson was probably sitting in his own home, wondering if his career would survive, probably angry at Marcus for not staying quiet, for making this complicated. But Marcus wasn't thinking about Dawson. He was thinking about the email from the teenager, the 3 other complaints buried in department files, the pattern of silence that protected officers and sacrificed citizens. His phone buzzed. A text from his bureau chief. Civil Rights Division opening formal investigation. They want your testimony next week. You ready? Marcus looked at his BMW, at the car that represented dreams and achievement, and the stubborn insistence that he deserved beautiful things without apology. He typed back, "I'm ready." But as he drove home, past suburban houses and manicured lawns, he wondered if ready was enough. If one man's testimony could shift a system built on looking the other way. If speaking up would change anything or just make him another cautionary tale. The doubt crept in like fog, heavy, suffocating, real. The call came from Torres, the young officer who discovered his badge. Her voice was hesitant, careful. "Special Agent Webb, I need to speak with you." Off the record, they met at a coffee shop 2 towns over. Torres arrived in civilian clothes, ball cap pulled low, looking over her shoulder like someone expecting to be followed. She slid into the booth across from Marcus, hands wrapped around a cup she didn't drink from. "I shouldn't be here," she said. "If Dawson finds out, or Miller, then why are you here?" Torres met his eyes. "Because you were right. About everything. And because I can't keep quiet anymore." She pulled a folder from her bag, slid it across the table. Inside were photocopies, incident reports, complaint forms, internal memos. 3 cases spanning 18 months. Different victims, same pattern. This one, Torres pointed to the first report, was a college student. Black kid, scholarship athlete, driving his girlfriend's Lexus. Dawson pulled him over for suspicious behavior, found nothing, but arrested him anyway for resisting arrest. Charges dropped 2 weeks later. She flipped to the next page. This one, Latino teenager walking home from his job at a restaurant. Dawson stopped him, searched him without cause, found nothing. Arrested him for loitering, released after his father hired a lawyer. The third case made Marcus's stomach turn. This one was a woman. Middle-aged black woman nurse driving home from a night shift. Dawson said she matched a description, pulled her out of her car at gunpoint, traumatized her so badly she had to take medical leave for anxiety. "Why weren't these investigated?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. "They were." Torres's voice dropped to a whisper. Internal Affairs looked at each one, found Dawson's actions within department guidelines, said the complaints were unsubstantiated or misunderstandings. One investigator noted that Dawson had an excellent arrest record and shouldn't be punished for being proactive. Marcus felt rage building in his chest, cold and controlled. They protected him. They always protect him. He's been on the force for 20 years. He knows people, has connections, and the victims— Torres trailed off, the implication clear. The victims were expendable, outsiders, people whose word carried less weight than a 20-year badge. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus asked. Torres looked down at her untouched coffee. "I joined this force because I wanted to help people. I believed in the oath. But watching what happened to you, seeing how quickly everyone moved to cover it up, I can't be part of that. If I stay quiet, I'm complicit." She pushed the folder toward him. "These people tried to speak up. They were silenced, bought off, or just gave up, because fighting the system was too hard. But you have resources, credibility, backup. If you use these cases to show the pattern, maybe someone will finally listen." Marcus studied her face. She was young, idealistic, still believing that the right evidence presented to the right people could change things. He'd been that young once, that hopeful. "This could end your career," he said. "I know." Torres stood, adjusting her cap. "But staying silent could end who I am." And I'd rather lose the job than lose that. She left cash on the table for coffee neither of them had drunk and walked out into the afternoon sun. Marcus sat alone with the folder, reading through cases that could have been his story, could have been his father's, could have been any one of 1,000 others. His phone buzzed. An email from the Civil Rights Division investigator assigned to his case. Agent Webb, we'd like to schedule your testimony. Also, we've received additional complaints about Officer Dawson filed in the last week. Your case appears to have encouraged others to come forward. Let me know your availability. Marcus read the email twice. Then he opened his contacts and found the number from that first anonymous email, the teenager who'd been arrested by Dawson 6 months ago. He typed, "Are you willing to testify? You won't be alone. There are others. And this time someone's listening." The response came within minutes. "Yes, tell me when and where." Marcus gathered the photocopied files Torres had given him. He thought about the gas station video, viewed now by millions. The complaints buried in department files. The pattern of abuse protected by institutional inertia. One voice could be dismissed. One incident could be explained away. But multiple voices, multiple incidents, multiple victims telling the same story, that was harder to ignore. For the first time since the arrest, Marcus felt something shift. Not quite hope, not yet, but possibility. The faint outline of justice waiting to be claimed. He called his bureau chief. "Sir, I have evidence of a pattern. Multiple victims, documented complaints, all buried by internal affairs. I want to use it. Send me everything. We'll route it to the investigation team." Marcus hung up and pulled out his laptop. He began drafting a detailed timeline, cross-referencing dates and victims, building a case the way he'd been trained to build cases, methodically, thoroughly, leaving no room for doubt. Outside the coffee shop window, life continued its normal rhythm. But inside, Marcus was doing what he did best, gathering evidence, connecting threads, preparing to prove the truth that everyone already knew, but no one wanted to say. The system had failed these victims once. He wouldn't let it fail them again. The federal oversight hearing convened in a grey government building that smelled of old carpet and institutional indifference. Marcus sat at a table facing a panel of officials, 2 from the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division, 1 from the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility, and a federal magistrate overseeing the proceedings. Across the room, Dawson sat with his union attorney and the police department's legal counsel. His face was carefully neutral, but Marcus saw tension in his jaw, in the way his fingers drummed against the table edge. The room was half filled with observers. Press in the back row, civil rights advocates taking notes, and 3 other people Marcus recognized from the case files Torres had given him: the college student, the teenager, the nurse. They'd come to watch, to witness, to see if speaking up had mattered. The lead investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Chen, called the hearing to order. "We're here to examine allegations of racial profiling and civil rights violations by Officer James Dawson. Special Agent Webb, please describe the events of October 3rd. Marcus spoke clearly, without emotion, letting the facts carry their own weight. The gas station. The immediate suspicion. The arrest despite compliance. The handcuffs, the cell, the badge discovered too late. As he talked, Chen displayed the video on a large screen. The room watched in silence as Marcus was thrown against his car, cuffed, pushed into the patrol car. The crowd filming but not intervening. The wallet falling unnoticed to the pavement. When the video ended, the magistrate spoke. "Officer Dawson, you stated in your initial report that Agent Webb matched a vehicle theft advisory. Is that correct?" Dawson's attorney started to respond, but the magistrate cut him off. "I'm asking Officer Dawson directly." Dawson cleared his throat. "Yes, Your Honor. There was a bulletin about luxury vehicle thefts in the region. The BMW matched the description." Chen pulled up documents on the screen. "This is the bulletin you referenced. It describes a silver Mercedes sedan with specific plate numbers. Agent Webb was driving a blue BMW with Virginia plates that came back clean. Can you explain the discrepancy? Dawson shifted in his seat. In the moment, I assessed the situation as potentially suspicious. The subject was exhibiting nervous behavior. The subject, Marcus interrupted, voice sharp, had been driving for 18 hours after closing an undercover operation. I was tired. Not suspicious, tired. The magistrate gestured for Marcus to continue. What happened when you attempted to identify yourself? I told Officer Dawson I was FBI. He didn't listen, or didn't care. He was so certain I was guilty of something that evidence of my innocence didn't matter. Chen turned to Dawson. The gas station video has audio. We can hear Agent Webb attempting to explain. Why did you proceed with the arrest? He was resisting. He was standing with his hands visible, Chen corrected, replaying the footage. At no point does he physically resist. He verbally protests, which is his right. But he complies with every physical command. So I'll ask again, why did you arrest him? Silence. Dawson's attorney whispered something in his ear. Dawson's face flushed. I made a judgment call based on my training and experience. Your training told you to arrest a man with no evidence of wrongdoing? I had reasonable suspicion. Of what? Marcus leaned forward. Driving while black? Owning a car you assumed I couldn't afford? What exactly was reasonable about your suspicion? The room's temperature seemed to drop. Dawson's jaw clenched. That's not what this was about. Then what was it about? Marcus pressed. Because from where I was standing, face down on the pavement with your knee in my back, it seemed pretty clear what it was about. Chen raised a hand, calling for order. Let's examine Officer Dawson's record. We've received testimony from 3 other individuals who report similar incidents. She displayed the case files on the screen. The college student, the teenager, the nurse. Each case summary appeared in stark black text, dates, details, outcomes. In each instance, Chen continued, the complainant alleged racial profiling and excessive force. In each instance, Internal Affairs found the complaints unsubstantiated, but when we examine them together, a pattern emerges. She pulled up statistics. Over 18 months, Officer Dawson conducted 47 traffic stops. Of those, 39 involved drivers of color. He arrested 12 individuals. Of those 12, 9 were people of color. Of those 9 arrests, 7 were later dismissed due to lack of evidence or procedural violations. The numbers hung in the air, undeniable. Chen turned to Torres, who'd been called as a witness. Officer Torres, you were present at the station when Agent Webb's credentials were discovered. Please describe what happened. Torres spoke steadily, though her hands trembled slightly. I found his FBI badge in his wallet during evidence processing. I immediately informed Officer Dawson. She hesitated. He said it could be fake. I ran Agent Webb's credentials through the federal database. They were legitimate, but Officer Dawson instructed me to complete the arrest paperwork anyway. He told me to let them prove it's real. Gasps rippled through the room. Dawson's attorney shot to his feet. Objection. This testimony, this is a federal civil rights investigation, not a trial, the magistrate said calmly. I'll allow it. Officer Dawson, did you instruct Officer Torres to proceed with the arrest, despite confirming Agent Webb's federal credentials? Dawson's face had gone from red to pale. It was a chaotic situation. I may have said something that was misinterpreted. Did you or did you not tell Officer Torres to complete the arrest after his badge was verified? The magistrate's voice was steel, long silence. Then, barely audible, I wanted to be thorough. You wanted to be thorough, Marcus repeated slowly. So thorough that you arrested a federal agent, violated his civil rights, and traumatized his family, all because you couldn't admit you'd made a mistake based on prejudice. Dawson's attorney tried to intervene, but Dawson spoke over him, voice rising. You don't know what it's like out there. Every day, dealing with criminals, with people lying to your face, with danger around every corner. I have to make split-second decisions. I don't have time to see me as human. Marcus finished. To give me the benefit of the doubt you'd give someone who looked different? To question your own assumptions before ruining someone's life? The room fell silent. Chen closed her folder. Based on the evidence presented, the video documentation, the pattern of complaints, Officer Torres's testimony, and Officer Dawson's own admissions, this panel finds sufficient grounds for civil rights violations. Our recommendations will be forwarded to the Justice Department for potential federal charges, and to the Police Department for immediate disciplinary action. She turned to Dawson. Officer Dawson, pending final review, you are hereby suspended without pay. Your badge and service weapon will be surrendered immediately. Dawson's face crumbled. His attorney whispered urgently, but Dawson wasn't listening. He stared at Marcus across the room with something like hatred, or maybe recognition, the look of a man watching his career die because he'd refused to see past his prejudice. Marcus felt no satisfaction, just exhaustion, and relief that it was finally over. But as the hearing adjourned and people filed out, the college student approached Marcus. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for not staying silent, for making them listen. Because of you, my complaint is being reopened. Real investigation this time." The teenager was next. Then the nurse, each one thanking him, each one crying slightly, each one carrying years of trauma that was finally being acknowledged. Marcus shook their hands, accepted their gratitude, and felt the weight of what he'd started. One video, one complaint, but it had cracked open something larger, a system of silence that protected abusers and abandoned victims. Torres approached last. "I'm transferring departments," she said. "Can't stay there, but I'm glad I spoke up." "It took courage," Marcus told her. "No," she replied. "You had courage. I just finally found my conscience." She walked away, and Marcus was left standing in the empty hearing room, surrounded by the evidence of injustice and the faint possibility of change. 3 months later, Marcus returned to active duty. The Bureau reinstated him with a formal apology and a commendation for his handling of the situation. His personnel file now included both the incident and the outcome, a record that couldn't be erased or ignored. Dawson faced federal civil rights charges. The trial was scheduled for spring. The police department entered a consent decree, agreeing to bias training, civilian oversight, and stricter protocols for traffic stops and arrests. 3 other officers resigned quietly, rather than face similar scrutiny. The video had been viewed 14 million times. Marcus's face was now recognizable to strangers who nodded at him in grocery stores, who whispered, "That's him," in coffee shops, who saw him as symbol rather than person. He hated that part. The attention, the recognition, the way his worst moment had become public property. But he understood why it mattered. Every view was someone bearing witness, someone who couldn't claim they didn't know this happened, couldn't pretend the system was fine. Simone stood beside him through all of it. The interviews, the testimony, the late nights when doubt crept in and Marcus wondered if speaking up had been worth the cost. She reminded him of the letters they received, hundreds of them, from people who'd experienced similar injustice, who felt less alone because Marcus had refused to stay silent. Nia was different now. Older somehow, though only months had passed. She asked harder questions, understood darker truths. But she also watched her father fight and refuse to break, and that lesson would carry her further than any amount of protected innocence. Marcus sat in his BMW outside Nia's ballet recital. He'd made this one, arrived early, claimed the best seat in the auditorium. The car still ran perfectly. He still loved driving it. But it meant something different now. Not just achievement, but defiance. Proof that he wouldn't make himself smaller to avoid other people's discomfort. His phone buzzed. A text from Torres' first day at new department. Chief here actually read your case, used it in training. Things are changing, slowly but changing. Marcus smiled. Slowly was better than never. Progress measured in policy changes and officer suspensions, and one fewer victim next month. Next year, next generation. He thought about his father, who'd called after the hearing with pride thick in his voice. You did what I couldn't, son. You fought back and won, but Marcus knew he hadn't won. Not completely. Dawson was one officer in one department. The system that protected him still stood, still turned away from inconvenient truths, still made victims prove their innocence, while officers were granted automatic credibility. But the cracks were wider now. The light was getting in. Marcus locked his car and walked into the auditorium. He found his seat in the front row. Simone squeezed his hand, and when Naya appeared on stage, spotlight catching her face, Marcus felt something unknot in his chest. His daughter danced with fierce grace, arms extended, body commanding space without apology. She owned that stage the way Marcus had learned to own his story, refusing to shrink, refusing to silence, refusing to accept that dignity was something to be granted rather than claimed. The music swelled. Nia spun, confident and strong, exactly who she was supposed to be, and Marcus understood this was why he'd fought. Not for justice in the abstract, not for policy changes or departmental reforms. For this. For his daughter to grow up in a world slightly less willing to assume her guilt. For her to believe she could demand better, and actually receive it. The recital ended to thunderous applause. Nia found him in the crowd, her smile radiant and unbroken. Marcus stood and applauded his daughter's performance, her courage, her refusal to be anything less than herself. And in that moment, he felt something he'd lost at that gas station months ago. Hope. Not the naive kind he'd carried as a young agent. Something harder, earned through humiliation and fight and the stubborn insistence that speaking up mattered, even when the system wanted silence. Hope that change was possible. Hope that his fight had opened doors. Hope that Nia's world would be different than his, even if only incrementally, even if only in small and imperfect ways. It wasn't victory, but it was progress. And sometimes progress was enough. 6 months after the arrest, Marcus returned to the gas station. Not because he had to, because he needed to see it one more time, the place where everything had broken and eventually everything had changed. He parked at Pump 7, the same spot. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, painting everything in harsh white light. The smell of gasoline hung in the humid air. A family pulled up to the next pump. Father, mother, 2 kids bouncing in the back seat. The father was black, mid-30s, driving a newer Audi. He glanced at Marcus's BMW, then at Marcus and smiled. Small acknowledgement between strangers who understood the same unspoken reality. The man filled his tank peacefully. No patrol car materialized. No assumptions landed like accusations. Just a man fueling his car, existing without incident. The baseline dignity everyone deserved but not everyone received. Marcus thought about the question Nia had asked that night, tears streaming down her face. Why did the policeman hurt Daddy? He had an answer now. Not one he'd wanted to give, but one that was true, not because of anything he'd done, because of what someone assumed before looking, before listening, before seeing him as human rather than threat. Because bias doesn't announce itself. It hides in snap judgments, in who gets benefit of the doubt, in whose word carries weight. Because the badge he carried couldn't protect him from the color of his skin. Because achievement and innocence and federal credentials weren't enough when prejudice decided guilt before evidence spoke. But here's what else he'd learned. Silence protects the system that protects the abusers. Speaking up is dangerous, costly, exhausting. But it's also the only weapon that works against injustice that thrives in darkness. One voice can be dismissed. Many voices become undeniable. Marcus finished fueling. He climbed into his BMW. the car that had been both catalyst and symbol. The engine purred to life. He pulled onto the highway, the same road where everything had changed.